I think that the testimony is very appropriate for my topic tonight, and really the idea of what this summer project is all about. And girls, tell me your names again.
Elise and Alexa.
Okay. Elise, when you finished, I think you were the last one that said this. You could have said that about after you showed the multiplication of how the gospels come to you through. And you said it really does change. It really does change your whole life. I think that's how you kind of. And I thought, that's it right there. That's really what we believe. That God comes to us and He changes our whole life, and that means that He changes our past, and it does mean that He changes our present. He literally changes the past, guys. He changes the present, but He changes the future. And what following Him is all about is that now you're on a whole new trajectory for your future. And what's so amazing is you saw a picture of it. It's because God is covenantal. You've heard that term before. God is a covenant God. What it means is that at the heart of the Trinity, the central reality of the universe is relationship. And the central expression of that relationship is permanent commitment. And as you were sharing, you girls were sharing your story, I was just thinking about every single one of you in this room is now on a totally different trajectory. Now we know that. You're going, as John 5:24 or John 17:3 says, or John 3:16, you're on the trajectory of eternal life. You're going to spend eternity in relationship with the covenantal God who said, I am permanently now your father, and you're permanently now my child. Well, how much better could life be, no matter what you face, to know that you're permanently in God's family? But it's more than that. It's even greater than that. Think about what is happening is you're gaining a whole new idea of your own value and importance in your own identity. You're learning that your identity is not based in your appearance, it's not based in your performance, it's not based in your achievements or accomplishments. Your identity is based in the fact that you have this permanent relationship with God, and it's a relationship of love. And it can now shape everything you think about yourself, because the God of all the universe has committed this permanent commitment to love you. So it begins to change your identity, and that begins to change your relationships. And it changes how you talk to people, and it changes how you deal with conflict, and it changes, and it gives you some inner fortitude to take some criticism when you need to look hard at things that are not going well in your life. And it gives you the courage to give a truthful word to somebody when you used to be afraid of what they were going to think about you. And now all of a sudden this gospel's moving outside of just you. It's producing an ability to build permanent relationships with other people. And it's preparing you to move to the point where one day God's going to lead you to, maybe most of you, maybe not all of you, but to start a new family like you've seen with some of these staff. And you're going to learn about permanent commitment between one man and one woman, and you're going to build a family together. And that family's going to be really different than the family you grew up in. And what you've learned about permanent commitment and love is going to change the way you talk to your children and how you deal with them when they disappoint you and you disappoint them, and how to think about achievement and goals and self-worth and image and values. And now your children are going to have a whole different kind of experience. And that's what God does, is God changes everything about you. Think about that. Now that He's in your life, you're not going to be in the same kind of job. You're not going to have the same kind of, your attitude towards money is not going to be the same. Everything about you has changed. What happened on earth? Does it? Well, wake up. Okay. You wake up. Okay. So, it's probably okay. And I think it's so important because I want to take it a step further. I said to you, God changes your past and your present and your future. And that means that as a covenantal God, He doesn't just forgive the sins of your past. It says that those years, numbers, I'll look it up, I think it's 33, but I'll find the verse. Those years that you spent wasting your life, and when He calls it the years of the locust, those years that you spent wasting your life, God goes back and redeems even all of those broken places, because every broken part of your life will become part of your story, the story that you tell, the healing story that you teach your children, and the brokenness of your past is going to be part of that story that God's going to heal. But He's also going to heal those relationships in the past, because God doesn't just work the covenant forward, He works the covenant in reverse. Now, this is a picture of our family. And our oldest is Keith, and he's 29. That's at Fenway Park. Sorry, I heard Cards fans here. But Keith lives in Boston, and he just finished a postdoctoral PhD at MIT, so he's obviously the smartest person in our family. This is Chris, and he's married. He's pretty smart. He picked this girl out and married her. We are from Augusta, Georgia, so you golfers, that is the practice round. That's a putting green, Augusta National, and they're great patrons there. And Chris and Olivia are pharmacists. Connor is our baby, the youngest. He's going to be a junior in college. And then Anna just graduated from college. And then Roy is a Chinese student here that is a high school student that lives with us during the school years. He's kind of a part of our family too. And what's beautiful is to see how God has allowed us to bless our children through this permanent covenant relationship that we've experienced. But it's also cool, and I'll tell you more about it as we go, how He's worked back in our family's relationships. And Sandra did not grow up in a Christian home, and my parents were nominal church religious people, didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus either. And so when I came to know Christ, the first thing that my parents said was, well, you were already a Christian, because we're all Christians. You know, we're not Muslims and we live in America. Of course we're Christians. What do you mean you became a Christian? So that was really offensive to begin with. And then going into the ministry was even more offensive, that I would waste my life begging people for money in order to, chase these religious dreams. And Sandra's family pretty much raised her to be on her own and really had no sense of commitment to her and her development. But it's been a beautiful story about through the years, God has gone back and used Sandra to lead her sister to Christ. And then when her father came to know the Lord before he died, and then 7 years after I came to know Christ, my brother came to know Christ. And then my brother leading my father to faith in Christ. And I'm just telling you right now, you don't know the end of the story. God has saved you, and you know what that means? It means blessing has come to your house. If you read in the Scriptures, every time Jesus would come into a person's life, it said it blessed their whole house. And so God's got a plan for you. Just hang on. But He's got a plan for your family too. Now, this is a weird place to find this, but read 1 Corinthians 7. This got nothing to do with what I'm supposed to talk about, but I want to share it. Read 1 Corinthians 7. And it's interesting when it says that it's talking about when it's actually talking about singleness and marriage. And And Paul is talking about what happens when you come to know the Lord and your spouse is an unbeliever. So there was questions in Corinth about whether or not when you came to know Christ, did you leave your family? Or did you stay with your family? Did you leave your wife if she didn't convert to Christ? And Paul says that you are not to leave as a believer. If your spouse leaves, he says, let them leave. But you're not to believe, and you're to pray and ask God to work in their life. But he goes on to say, the unbelieving spouse is, and he uses this word, sanctified by the believing husband, or the believing spouse. Then he says, and so it says that as such, that unbelieving spouse is sanctified. That's usually a word we use for believers, people who have a relationship with Christ. But the word basically means set apart or special sanctity. It's important, it's connected, it's valued. But he goes on to say, if that weren't true, the children would have no hope. But he says, but God counts them as holy. So what is he talking about there? Here's what he's talking about. When God comes into your life and he has a covenantal relationship with you, by virtue of the fact that he has a relationship with you, he has a special relationship with everybody in your family. There's a blessing, a special blessing for everybody in your family by virtue of the fact he has a relationship with you. There's benefits, there's blessing. He thinks and cares for your unbelieving parents in ways now that he does not care directly for unbelieving creation. That's what 1 Corinthians 7 says. And I'm telling you now, God's plan of multiplication for your life is about building a new family and finishing the work from the family that he puts you in. So don't give up hope, okay? Now, my task is to talk to you about multiplication. And I heard a missions conference speaker a few years ago ask this question at our missions conference. He said, is your life your best answer to the Great Commission? Is your life your best answer to the Great Commission? I thought about that, and I thought, well, that kind of dials in to some degree a very challenging question to ask Christian college students. But I think I have a more challenging question. I want to ask you this. Is the Great Commission a satisfactory answer for your life ambition? Now, this is probing, is your life your best answer to the Great Commission? But let's probe a little deeper. Is the Great Commission a satisfactory answer for your life ambition? When you finish your life, as Jim Downey has finished his life, when you're 102.9, or whatever that is, 9/12, when you are thinking back on your life, will you be able to say, I have some regrets, I have some disappointments, but I would have never done it any differently? Now, I am still the living oldest campus parish staff person. I'm the dinosaur, and at 55 years old. Okay, so I am a very old campus outreach guy. Okay, my wife, I married a very child bride. She was a lot younger than me. But even at this point in my life, I want y'all to know, I wake up knowing I'm so glad that God was gracious to allow me to make the decisions I made to set my life on this course and invest with college students. I have no regrets. I never think, what if? I think, I've had a great life. The life that God has given us I wouldn't want any other kind of life. And I want each of y'all to have that life. And so how can you get to the point where at the end of your life, you say, my life is my best answer to the Great Commission? How can you live every day with the conviction that the Great Commission is a satisfactory answer for your life? I believe it's in this, committing to being a person who multiplies your life. It's a commitment to multiplication. And I hope that when I finish this talk, you're going to say, I understand what he means, and I am more motivated than ever. If I thought I was committed to multiplication, I want you to know what the goal of this talk is. It's for you to say, I'm more committed than ever. I was at a conference for our denomination this week, and this name might not mean anything to you, but I think he's probably the most influential Christian in the world right now. His name is Tim Keller. He's a pastor of Redeemer Church in Manhattan. Well, he's a member of our denomination. He was preaching to 1,200 pastors and their wives at this conference that I was at. And he preached the gospel in such a way that I wanted to pray to receive Christ again. I wanted another chance to ask Jesus into my life when I got through hearing him preach the gospel. That's when you know you've heard the gospel. Well, I hope that when I get through talking about multiplication, you'll say, I know I made a commitment to the Great Commission. And if you haven't, I hope you'll make a commitment to say, I'm going to multiply my life. All right? That's where we're going. And if you've already said that, I hope you're so motivated when we get through with this talk that you're going to say, I'll make that commitment again. I always joke and laugh about these Baptists that were always rededicating. You know, it's like, oh, they're just rededicating. It's like, well, if you ever got saved once, they wouldn't have to get rededicated. You know, just come to know the Lord once, and well, there is a sense in which when you hear the gospel, in a sense, you want to get saved all. I do. I want to get saved all over again because it's such a beautiful. It's like I still can't believe it that God would save me. You know, and I hope I never get over it. And I hope you never get over it either. Okay. So that's where we're going. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise to you. Campus Outreach is committed to multiplication. We're uniquely focused on evangelism and discipleship and leadership development, uniquely. We believe that the campus is not just a strategic mission field. We believe the campus is a launching pad. Right? It's not just a mission field. It's also a launching pad. Now listen, you're going to run into a lot of other Christian ministries on your campus. They might have bigger ministries. They might have bigger shows. They might have better boys, girls. You know, say, oh, they got a whole lot of boys over there. You know, there might be a lot of really provocative and intriguing and encouraging and interesting things that they offer. But let me just tell you this. Other ministries may do fellowship better. They might have greater worship and singing. They might offer more service opportunities. But I'll tell you, we're committed to one thing. It's gospel-driven, word-saturated multiplication. Okay? That's what we're all about. So don't be confused. Everything that happens on the summer project, it's all about this. We believe that God's called us to multiply our lives. And to multiply our lives in a way that blesses the whole world. And that's what we're doing. Okay? So don't get confused. Can we do fellowship better? Yes. Can we do parties better? I'm sure. Can we do worship and music? Yeah, maybe. But we haven't decided that we want to be great at that. We've decided we want to be great at life-on-life missional discipleship. Okay? And how one person can have an impact on one person and see their whole world change. That's what we call multiplication. Okay. I want to talk to you about the Great Commission first, because I want you to see it biblically. And what I have here is all the major verses that are referenced. And I'll give this slide to Brett. I may have already sent you this. I don't know. But so you don't have to write all these verses down, or somebody can take a picture of it, whatever. But like I said, I'll give you this dot. But I want you, if we took a study, these are all the major passages in the New Testament that make some reference to the Great Commission. In addition to, I could walk you through the book of Genesis all the way through the Old Testament and see that God's plan is really summarizing what God said to Abraham, which is Genesis 17, I believe. Okay? God said to Abraham, Abraham, I will be your God. Covenant, right? Covenantal. I will be your God. You will be my people. I will bless you. I will make you a great people or a nation, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed by your family. Now, remember where we started here. God's going to take you out of your brokenness. He's going to build you and teach you how to build a family. And from your family, He's going to bless every family in all the earth. Well, that's the promise that He made Abraham. It's called the Abrahamic what? Covenant. The Abrahamic Covenant, where God says, I save individuals. I call them. I teach them how to build families, and from those families, going to bless the whole world. Well, when you get to the Great Commission, you see that we got a problem here. Not every family, God's plan in Genesis 1, you probably heard it. God's plan was to populate the whole earth through multiplication. Genesis 1, 27 and 28, right? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth with my glory, right? And then what happens is man turns from God and says, God, I think I kind of want to build my own thing. I want to build my own name. I want to build my own family. And that's the whole tower story. The Tower of Babel is about man building his own power, through his own power, his own name for himself. So what we come to in the New Testament is that God, we had a plan for one family to bless all the families, and that family wasn't faithful. There was a remnant that was faithful. So from that line came a Savior, and it said He's going to save the whole world. And that's what you get in the New Testament. All these passages, Matthew 28, go make disciples of all the nations. Baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Teach them to observe all that I command you. Mark 16, 15, and 16. Go preach the gospel to every creature. Matthew 24, 14. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to all the world as a witness to the nations, and then the end shall come. Luke 24, 46, 55. I won't give you all. I got most of all of these memorized. But the repentance and forgiveness of sins shall be preached to the ends of the earth. John 20. As the Father has sent me into the world, so I am sending you. Acts 1:8. You shall receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. You shall be my witnesses, first in Jerusalem, Judea, all Samaria, and then the uttermost parts. Okay? On and on and on. 1 Corinthians 15, Romans 10, Romans 15. Preach the gospel where Christ is not known. Revelation 5, 9, Revelation 7, 9. We get to the end. Every tribe, nation, tongue before the throne of God. So, there's three, if you summarize those passages, there's three expressions that help us understand the scope, that help us understand what it means to fulfill the Great Commission. The first thing is the scope. It has to do with we're all about reaching the whole world. The second has to do with strategy, how we're going to get there. And then the third thing has to do with strength. Okay? So the Great Commission passages are unpacked with the scope involved, the strategy, and the strength. So what does he mean by scope? Real quickly. It's interesting. It's every, or ethnos, like every single person from every ethnicity, but it's also every individuals in the world. So the scope is about individuals that are representative of people from every tribe, nation. That's what we picked up in Revelation 7. So that's the scope. Strategy. What's the strategy? Well, it's real simple, y'all. Every disciple teaching disciples. Every disciple teaching disciples. It's real simple. Now just think about it in your family. If we have 4 children, right? If all 4 of those children get married, and then they all have 4 children, and they mature, and they start families, and they have children. You see where we're going with this, right? That's the way God designed it. Every disciple teaches disciples. But if you have some that either, as Jim Downing was saying earlier, they are immature, or they're sick, they're not able to reproduce, then obviously we don't multiply our world. And then the last part is strength. At the beginning, all these passages speak of this, but what's interesting in Matthew 28, part of what discipleship is all about, the key element to what discipleship is all about, is that, let me back up because I want to make one more point about strategy. Each disciple teaching disciples to be disciples, and each disciple teaching disciples to make disciples. I know that's overly simplistic, but each disciple. But I wanted to say this. Never forget this. Discipleship is, in a phrase, love training. The heart of what discipleship is all about is love training. We're training people how to be changed by the love of God, how to respond and live in relationship by offering love back to God, and how to be someone who can love other people, first believers and also unbelievers. Discipleship is just about one thing, training people how to love. And the reason why people have brokenness in their lives, they don't know how to receive love, they don't know how to give love. So that's the heart of discipleship. So all the rules about what's going on in discipleship and accountability. You might be a new Christian, you might be like, I'm on this project, my head's just spinning, and I want me to do this. It's like, boy, that's it. Well, it's all about teaching you how to love. And sometimes that means teaching you how to receive love. And sometimes that means teaching you how to give love. So, I'll give you an example. In your group, you might not have liked it when the leader said, well, let's go around and share our weaknesses. Or better yet, why don't I share with you what I think your weaknesses are? I don't know what your leader did. But I'm just saying, you might have felt like, you're getting really personal. You know, you're kind of moving in my space, and you're in my face, and I don't know that I like that. You know, I would like you to back up, you know, step back, right? Step back, right? Okay, there we go. Well, you know what discipleship says? I love you too much to step back. It says that you have been trained to do this, to push people away, or you've been trained to bring people close to you in a way that you want to use or manipulate them for your purposes. But you hadn't really had to learn. You hadn't learned how to love. So if you're a new Christian, what's happening on the project is you're learning how to allow people to move close to you. How do you talk about what you don't like but not in such a caustic and hurtful way that you hurt everybody else around you? How do you talk about your disappointments how do you talk about your joy? All that's love training, okay? I just want you to know that's where we're going with this discipleship. Okay. Now, strength. The only way you do this is you understand that God has given you all the strength that you need. And look at these. This is the beginning of Matthew 28. I mean, this is the beginning and ending of the Great Commission, Matthew 28. But it runs through all of those passages. It really runs through the whole Bible. But I summarize it with these two phrases: all authority and always with you. Now think about those two things. He says at the first, all authority has been given to me, heaven and on earth. Go make disciples. And the last thing he says is, I will be with you always. I will be with you always in all authority. He has bracketed your whole life and your whole commission with the two most important things, I would say. The two strongest hands that you need in order to fulfill what God's asked you to do. On one hand, you need to know that there's something or someone strong enough to overcome all the challenges that you face. You need a strength when you don't feel strong. You need a power when you feel like you can't go on. And he starts with all power. But it's not just that arm. God holds you with both arms. And he also says you need someone close to you when you feel lonely. You need someone near you when you feel scared. You need someone who will reassure you, I'm going to get you out of this mess. And it's going to be fine. You need power when you're facing that enemy, but you need a personal touch when you're facing the enemy. Well, I can say this. You need power when you're facing the enemy on the outside. But you need comfort when you're facing the enemy on the inside, right? You need that personal touch. And that's what's so beautiful about the Great Commission. He says, you can do this because I am going to hold you. One hand is my hand of protection. The other hand is my hand of provision. And you, in the middle of that, can be free to fulfill the Great Commission. So, it kind of played this way out in the life of Jesus. The first phase, you'll probably heard this, is evangelism. It started with language like this where Jesus said, come and see. And he went house to house and he was teaching about multiplication, but he was focused on healing and it was a broad presence there. The second phase is what we call establishing. You see that in Mark 3, 1-4. I meant to quote Mark 1, 14, 15. It says, Jesus came into Galilee, preaching the gospel of the kingdom and saying, the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of God is at hand. Therefore, repent and believe in the good news, right? So that's evangelism. So the first kind of summarized message in his strategy was come and see. Come and see. But then, Mark 3, 14 and 15 says that he called all the crowds to the mountain which he designated, called them to him. And it says he chose 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach. Think about what he says there in Mark 3 when he called the disciples. It says he chose the 12, the first thing, that they might be with him. What did I just say? God's going to, with all authority and power, but also with nearness, I'll be with you. And he puts it in this order. First, he chose 12 that they might be with him. And that he might send them out to preach. It says he gave them authority, all the power they needed to fight the enemy on the outside. But he also gave them the presence that they needed to deal with the enemies on the inside. So that's called establishing and learning and truly believing that God is for me and with me in that way. Brett and I kept thinking that it would happen in my conversation with Jim, with you guys, but then we met with the staff, and then later Maggie came up and asked Jim the question, just tell me more about your time with God. And tell me, like, what do you do when you spend time with God? And I've been with Jim a whole lot, and I usually can kind of, it's like a vending machine. I can push a button, and I know what's coming out, if y'all notice how to ask a question. Because he's basically thought through how he'd answer these basic questions in college. So he's so brilliant, but he's also just, so disciplined, regimented. Usually what he says when somebody, I'll give you his answer, Maggie, but I think it was another staff girl was asking this question, but when somebody asked him, how do you approach your time with God? He said, well, some people ask me, they ask me, how long do you spend with God? Or some people say, do you read, do you study a passage, or what do you do? He said, this is what I believe a quiet time. I can't try not to use his voice. Okay. He said, this is what I believe is a quiet time. He said, I spend time in the Bible with the Lord as long as it takes until my heart is reassured that God's love is enough for every challenge I'm going to face that day. Can you improve upon that right there? I'm going to stay at the feet of Jesus long enough. Maybe that's 5 minutes. Maybe that's 50 minutes. I'm going to stay until I'm going to read and I'm going to reflect until I'm convinced that God's love is enough for anything that I will be facing today. And so he says, I'll think about my day. It's like I start feeling anxious, or I got to put that in front of it. I got to read a scripture. I got to be convinced, because you know what? That's why he saved me. And that's what Jesus said. That's the part of establishing our lives to follow him. Well, the third is equipping. And Mark 6 says that he commissioned the 12 to go to other cities to cast out demons, to proclaim the gospel. And it's really a measure of leadership development beyond just establishing. You can see that on your summer projects. When people come back to the project to participate in leadership, what are we doing? We're helping you to be established in your faith, right? And they're learning leadership principles and equipping them to reach others. So now the language moves from come and see and follow me, and now it moves to feed my sheep, and learning about how we began to parent and reparent other young believers. That's part of his process. And then the last is what we call missions. So really the Great Commission is evangelism, discipleship, leadership development, and missions. Or as Mark 16:14-16 says, go and preach the gospel to every creature. And Camasary's strategy language is we use the phrase export. Why do we use the phrase export? Well, it's the fourth E. All right, I'm sorry. There's probably a better word for it, but we think that it kind of sequences better. It's easy to remember. So these are the 4 E's. Maybe you guys talk about that. You've heard leaders talk about that. We train people in that way. As we follow this, what is the language that Jesus used? What's come and see, follow me, feed my sheep, and go tell the world. Now, sometimes when I say go tell the world, there's also, this is what Jesus said on the outside to the masses. This is the Great Commission, go tell the world. But you know what Jesus said on the inside? He pulls the disciples together and says, well, there's kind of an insider's phrase for this. We say, go tell the world. You know what the insider phrase is? Go and die. Go and die. And you're like, what? Well, when you start reading Jesus saying, unless the grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears fruit. And he says, if any man wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. What he's saying is that when we get to the point of missions or reaching other people, we have been established to the point where God's love is so powerful in our lives and we're so secure in that, we don't need anybody or anything from anyone else in order to make us feel complete, whole, or good about ourselves, and we spend the rest of our lives giving our lives away to meet the needs of other people. That's just another way of saying the Great Commission is go and die, is that we've accepted and experienced His love in such a way that we're freed up to do that. So, I do want to just quickly run through this idea of 5 things that multiplication models for us, okay? The first thing is it models the heart of God. Now, I've already said that, but in John 10, Jesus talks about He's the good shepherd. And He uses language of shepherd and the sheep, right? And He talks about that He draws these sheep near to His heart. He takes care of them. He leads them in and out that they might find pasture. So multiplication, first and foremost, teaches about the heart of God. Now think about this, y'all. God's heart is such that He is at all times able to be your Savior, and that doesn't diminish in any way His ability to be your Savior. He is your Father, and that doesn't diminish in any way His ability to be your Father. Now, in human terms, we can't do that. I'd like to say that I love all my children the same. To be honest, those 3 boys are stinky, sweaty, they drive me crazy, and I have that sweet little girl. I always say I have a rose in the midst of all my thorns. And not exactly. I love my boys too, as they allow me to love them in unique ways. But even in your family, in your friendships, there's challenges for how do you love. There's never that way with God. You're never the problem child with God. You're never the one that's hard to love, but your sister is the apple of your eye. Not with God. He models this for us. He says, I'm the good shepherd, and I'm your shepherd. There's an interesting passage. I won't take time. I've got to tell you this, though. It's very interesting. But there's a phrase in Revelation that says that one of the things we'll get when we get to heaven is we'll get a stone. That's why I say, go to Dawes' grave, always pick up a stone, pick up a rock. But there's a verse, and y'all look it up. I'm not going to tell you what the verse is. You can try to find it. There's a verse that says, God is going to give every believer, when they get to heaven, a stone. Jesus is going to give it to you. And it says, look this up, because when you hear this, you're going to think, that ain't in the Bible. He's making that up. We don't have time. Don't get on your phones right now. But in Revelation, it says, He's going to give us all a stone with a name that no one else knows but Him. We're going to have a name, an intimate name, that He's going to called us that nobody else knows. That's the kind of God that we serve. So multiplication models the heart of God. So when you're focused on discipling a few people and teaching them how to grow, part of what you're doing is modeling God's heart where He says, you're the apple of my eye. Secondly, multiplication models the church. 1 Corinthians 12, Ephesians 4, Acts 1, Acts 2. The church, it models the church in the sense that every single person in the church has a part to play. Nobody's on the sidelines. Now, you may have heard this before. Somebody said, Christianity is a lot like a football game. Christianity is a lot like a football game. Maybe it's in the horseshoe. Is that what you Ohio State people call it? A little small stadium? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's not that small. Yeah. Yeah. It's a little small. That's right. That's why we're using it as an illustration. Okay. So, it's how many? 105,000? What's 115? 110. All right. We'll, evangelistically speaking, 110. Okay. All right. So it's 110,000. Let's say it's 110,000. So this is let's say Christianity is like a football game. You have 22 people on the field. Excuse me. We'll start with this. You have 115,000 people in the stand, but you have 22 people on the field. You have 22 people fighting and struggling, giving every ounce of energy to survive this battle and to conquer the opponent. And those 22 people desperately need rest. And then you have 115,000 people in the stand, and they're going crazy, and they're pulling for their team. And they desperately need exercise. And that's the Christian life all too often. You have your pastor, you have your children's ministry director, you have your staff worker, and they're working hard to make sure everybody's growing. And then you have people that are just kind of along for the ride. Multiplication is totally different because it models the church. You read 1 Corinthians 12, you read Ephesians 4, you read 2 Timothy 2. What does it say? Everybody's to be involved. Nobody's to be a spectator. We're all to be participants. Now, just a quick review of church history. You may have known this. The first 500 years of Christianity, the church grew to 10% of the world's population. In the second 500 years, Europe was evangelized, North Africa was evangelized, yet the Middle East was lost to Islam in the second 500 years. The slowest or the littlest church growth, the smallest church growth, was the third 500 years. We call that what? Does anybody know what they call it? The Dark Ages, right. The Dark Ages, where Christianity we kind of figured out everything we thought, but basically Christianity had become really centered on power through government, power through church and state unity. And then the last 500 years, really the last 200 years, there's been a dramatic upswing. 30% of the world's population profess faith in Christ. Now, when Christianity started growing, there was, in the early church, there was about one Christian for every 100 people on the earth. That was at the time of Christ, in the beginning of, by 300 AD. Now think about this just proportionately. So there was one Christian for every, what did I say? 100. I said that wrong. In the New Testament, it was one Christian for every 1,000 people. By 300, when Constantine declared that Christianity was the religion of the state, there was one Christian for every 100 people on the earth. Okay? By the second 500 years, it moved to about one Christian for every 50 people on the earth. And then it just has staggered there until the last 200 years. And then in the last 100 years, it moved from 50 to 1 to 10 to 1. In the last 50 years, it's moved to 6 to 1. Now just think about that. On the earth right now, there's more Christians there's more Christians than have ever been believers in the history of the world, but there's more proportionate Christians, and Christianity is growing at amazing rates in Asia, Africa, and South America. In fact, in 1900, there was only 7% of the continent was Christian. Now, 33% of the continent. You may know that South Korea, 100 years ago, there was not even one Christian. 40% of that country professes faith in Christ. The Christianity is exploding in South America, in all Central America. It's exploding in Asia. It's exploding in Africa. Where is it declining? Europe. It's in the West. It's declining in the West. To some degree, the West had our time. And the West is too sophisticated. And you might say the Holy Spirit has moved on. And we will be on the sidelines cheering for our neighbors in terms of finishing the task. And I'm really encouraged by that, because the global south is where all the unreached people still are. The people who still are outside the kingdom. If you think about it like this. Of all the unreached people in the world that still don't have the gospel or haven't committed their life to Christ, most of them live in Southeast Asia. If you reach China and India, you get just about everybody else, right? We're almost there. And that's where the gospel is growing. The gospel is going. So you have a chance to be a part of what Matthew 24:14 was all about. Think about what Jesus said there. I want to quote that again for you. Write this down, but listen to this. It says, and I have no idea when I'm supposed to stop. I'm doing this rolling road. I'm sorry. All right, okay. Matthew 24:14. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to the ends of the earth as a witness to the nations, and then the end shall come. Jesus says, everybody tries to predict when this thing happens, when we know the end comes. Jesus says, when do we know the end comes? When the gospel of the kingdom is preached to the nations, to the ends of the earth as a witness to the nations. Well, listen, I think we're pretty close to seeing the gospel finish the task in our lifetime. So, it models the heart of God, it models the church, it models the family. 1 Thessalonians 2, 8 through 13, Paul says that I was well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but my very life, because you've become dear to me. Then he says that like a mother tenderly cares for his own children, he nourished and he says, as a mother tenderly cares for her own children, he nourishes. Then he says, as a father exhorts and encourages his own children. Then he says, as a brother, he uses familial language to describe discipleship. So what is he saying there? It's what I said earlier. What God does when you've been outside, or a broken family, you've been outside the covenant family, he brings you into the covenant family to teach you how to be a full family member so that you might build a covenant family. And so, multiplication models the family. You guys are learning things right now that are going to make you great moms and dads. You're learning things right now that are going to make you able to stay in your marriage when your parents couldn't stay in their marriage. You're going to be able to say, I'm sorry. You're going to be able to say, I forgive you. You're going to be able to say, well, that's not all that important. You're going to be able to say, I'm committed to you no matter what. You're going to be able to say, it doesn't matter about the money. You're going to be able to say, we're going to make ends meet. Where's that going to come from? It's going to come from the fact that God's built you into His family. It's going to allow you to build a family that stays together when things get hard. Not attacks one another and begins to fall apart. So multiplication models the family. And it models the kingdom. One of the things that Jesus does in Matthew 13 is that He uses all these parables of the kingdom. He says the kingdom is kind of like this. He says it's like a mustard seed. You plant it and it grows and a huge forest grows. And he said it's like leaven that's inside the dough. And you put it in there and the leaven causes that, it's a very small piece of dough and it causes it to grow and multiply. And that's what multiplication is. It's very small at the beginning, and it causes all of a sudden the blessing to be spread to the whole world. I'll tell you how that happened in your life in just a second. You're like, how does he know about my life? I'm about to tell you about your life. Every one of you. In just a second. Now, I did ask Brett for an apple. I forgot to see if he brought me one. But if we had an apple and I cut, did you bring me an apple?
I got you an apple.
Did you bring me a knife?
Yeah.
All right. Julie. Johnny or Julie on the spot, not Johnny on the spot. Okay. Now. Oh wow. Very good. I can do a lot better without that. All right. If we took this knife and we cut this apple, yes, apart, we probably would cut this into fourths, and the first thing that we would do is we would probably cut the seeds out or cut the core out, right, before we would eat it. Does anybody know how many seeds are in an apple? Well, that one. Anybody want to guess? There tends to be 4 to 6 on average. If you just say on average, it's not always the same. We could have counted it. It tends to be 4 to 6. What we usually do with the seeds, I was going to try to find one here. Yeah, there we go. You see the size of that seed. What we tend to do with the seed is we eat the fruit, right? It's probably felt one. And we tend to throw away the seed, right? You know what God says? Life is in the seed. He said, I'm interested in the seed. Let me ask it this way. He probably doesn't say, how many seeds are in an apple? He says, how many apples are in a seed? Because he's interested in the keys to life. You don't have this right here. That's pretty good. Good choice. You don't have that right there if you don't have this right here. Now, all of us, we're focused on fruit. You know what God's focused on? It's the seeds. And multiplication teaches you the way you change the big parts of your life. You start working on the little seeds. And you change, because this is the key to the whole operation. Right? That's what multiplication teaches, that God changes us from the inside out. Thank you, Julie. It's great. Bless somebody. Okay, all right. So, models the heart of God, models the church, models the family, models the kingdom. And it models the gospel message. You know that phrase, teach them to observe all that I commanded you. Teach them to observe all that I commanded you. So it's big and yet it's near. Think about that. Let's kind of review. Modeling the heart of God. Multiplication is big, but it's really near, right? It's just like helping individuals in order to change the whole world. But then it models the church. Everybody is involved. And then it models the family. It's that love trinity where he's changing us and teaching us. And then it models the kingdom where he takes little insignificant, maybe you feel that way. You didn't go to Harvard. You're not at MIT. You didn't major in, maybe you feel like, you're like, I'm just in, where am I? Am I Evansville, Indiana? Maybe? No.
Yes.
Edwardsville, Illinois? All right. What's in Evansville, Indiana? Yeah, I didn't know. Okay, come on now. Maybe I'm there. All right. Yeah, there we go. All right. So, and you see it models the gospel message. And it says, it's not, you don't become significant because of all of those things. By virtue of the fact that you're now God's child, that's what makes you significant. And now you are significant because God's love has come upon you. So what might seem like an out-of-the-way place, what might seem like an insignificant place, what might seem like not the most impressive major. What might seem like a life who's disappointed in the decisions you make, God's saying, hey, I'm going to multiply your life. Now, I wanted to make a connection here because these guys here are all navigators. And this is really blurry, you can't see him, but his name is Chuck Singletary. Chuck Singletary was discipled by Skip Gray, who was discipled by, this is Lauren Sandy that we kept talking about, Dawson Trotman, Leroy Hines, and I already showed you Jim Downing. So Skip Gray discipled Chuck Singletary. Chuck Singletary came to Birmingham, Alabama. Frank Barker was the pastor in Birmingham. And the first campus outreach director, staff person, founder is Curtis Tanner. That's who this is. This is Frank Barker and his wife, and they were at our Global Staff Conference a few years ago. Some of you staff were there. And really, Chuck Singletary came to Birmingham, and Frank Barker asked him, help teach me how to build evangelism and discipleship in my church. Chuck was on staff with the Navigators. He had come to Christ through Skip Gray at West Point, where Chuck was a student at West Point before he went into the military. He was on staff with the Navigators for 20 years, and he moved to Birmingham to start ministry in communities. It's when the Navigators began to spread beyond campuses and beyond the military and overseas. And he, on an invitation from Frank Barker, started teaching the church how to do evangelism and discipleship. And he built a friendship with Curtis Tanner, who was a new Christian growing at a campus in Alabama, and that's how Campus Outreach started. That was the beginnings of it. A guy that Curtis was discipling in Birmingham, Alabama, was quarterback of my football team in high school, and I was playing football in college at a small Division II school, and this guy began to have a burden for me. And he was in a discipleship group with Curtis. So they would write down people you're praying for, who you're going to share Christ with. And this friend of mine, his name was Benny, wrote my name down, Mike. So Curtis said, what are you going to do to share the gospel with Mike? So he mailed me a letter and had a little spiritual track. He said, when you come home, I'd like to talk about it. It sounds kind of like not all that impressive, but Jim Downing talks about fearless initiative, but it was fearless initiative. He mailed, I'm his friend. God's changing my life. I want to talk to you about it. He began to reach out to me. He began to share with me. He began to talk to me. And through his influence and through reading the Bible, I committed my life to Christ. Well, when I came home for the summer, I asked him, what do I do? And he took me to Curtis, and we started meeting in a discipleship group. And I was a sophomore in college. I really thought that I had, my track laid for what I wanted to do with my life. And I was business and, I was pretty exciting in here. You're right. Okay. And so the Lord began to change me. I was changing some of y'all. And when I got ready to graduate, I told my dad that I'm not going into, I was management information systems and management, business and management major. I wasn't going to go do what he was doing or what my brother was doing in sales. I was going to go into ministry. And it created a lot of fracture and tension with my father. But I worked on staff to the point where Campus Outreach grew to all these campuses in Alabama, kind of like y'all are doing in Illinois, how y'all are doing here in Indiana, other places, Missouri. And then we went to Georgia. And in 1986, I started a Bible study with football players on the West Georgia football team. So I'm going to tell you about West Georgia, but I want to ask you this question. Have any of y'all even heard of the college called West Georgia? Raise your hand if you've actually even heard of it. 2 or 3? Okay, so most of you, I want you to know. Okay, I want you to know. That's West Georgia, okay? All right. It's the place where people go because they couldn't go anywhere else. All right? I mean, close, but I'm just telling you. These guys went there to play football, and this guy here, Neil, I met him the first day we were there. Sandra and I went to a dance. We just walked in the middle. They had a freshman orientation dance, and so we were like, the fearless initiative. We just walked in there and just started meeting people and talking to them, and like right in the middle of this dance, the first day school's supposed to start, and I was sharing, what are you doing here? I was sharing Christ with this guy. It was, they're having to scream because the music was so loud. And so this guy over here tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, did you just say something about Jesus Christ?" And I said, "Yeah." And so later he told me, he said, "I was just impressed that anybody," he wasn't a Christian, but anybody would be bold enough to, say what their purpose was in front of this party when everybody else was probably saying Jesus Christ, but they had a different meaning for why they were saying Jesus Christ. And so we began to strike up a friendship. I began to share Christ with these guys, and they came to know the Lord. Now, you may or may not know, this was the West Georgia basketball team, and this is a guy named David Burns. Yeah, right there. So if you've all ever met David Burns came to college, and he wasn't a Christian, and one of the campus outreach staff guys that followed onto our campus, his name was Brian Lewis, began to share Christ with him, and he ended up leading him to Christ. Now, while we were at West Georgia, over about a 10-year period, these are some of the guys that came on staff with Campus Outreach. Clint Watson, Ken Curry. These names don't mean anything to y'all. Russell Long, Byron Johnson, Brian Lewis, Tony Chester, big old David Burns, who has no hair now. And what hair he has is gray. And yes, if you hear this, David, I did say that about you. Okay. Dempsey and Will Witherington. But I just want y'all to know, in about an 8 or 9 year period while we were working at West Georgia, since then we've seen Campus Outreach raise up teams all over the world. Augusta, Greenville, Charlotte, Memphis, Charleston, Atlanta, Indianapolis, South Africa, Minnesota, Lynchburg, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Brazil, San Diego, Dallas, St. Louis, Columbus, Denver. Now, if you trace back how the gospel spread to all of these places, it was a place, from a place, back to that little West Georgia, that little insignificant, unimportant town. Some of these people you may not recognize. It's a little blurry there. But we got Patrick Lewis there. And look at this young man right here. I think that's kind of a glamour shot. Couldn't we qualify that as like, he stopped the lady tomorrow and had a glamour shot? Okay. Well, this was the nucleus of course, Brian Lewis, after he left West Georgia with David Burns and some others, established Campus Outreach Memphis. But from there, they went and built this team here, which is what we know as Campus Outreach Indy. Well, Campus Outreach Indy, as we know, began to multiply. I just got some of these from Brett, and I was telling Patrick I did. Is that really Wally right there? Unbelievable. Yeah. So, and I just threw this up here. It doesn't include, but just to try to let you just see some of the faces. You might even see your face in that picture. Now, here's where it gets personal for you. Okay. Now, I want somebody to tell me, just real briefly, your testimony of how a staff person found you on your campus, especially if it was kind of the circumstances were like, how you met this person, or how you got involved in Campus Outreach, and how you came up. And then just a couple of people just to tell their story. Real brief, not like, I don't want 3 minute testimony, but just like, you ran into a staff person, or they ran into you, or somebody found you, and that person shared the gospel with you. Tell me, let's just have a couple of them real quick.
They elbowed me in the nose playing basketball.
So y'all playing in a basketball game. He elbowed you in the nose. Where to go from there?
Thought my nose was broken. He invited me to a weekly picnic, and then from there I met Mike. And then Mike shared the gospel.
And Mike started sharing the gospel with you. That's how you met. Through a basketball game. Okay. And that was dating, all right? I need one more, maybe a female.
Julie came up this morning when I was eating lunch, and we just started talking and met up a few days later, once a week. We just talked, and she was maybe
She sat down next to you. What part of the year of the school year?
Like first month,
The first month of school.
I think. Is that right, Julie?
Okay. And one more, maybe another camp. Somebody else, one more than
I
that.
went to.
Okay.
I met Chelsea the first day of school, and I couldn't find like my professor's email in the directory, and so she like helped me find it. I was like, "Well, do you go here?" And she was like, "No, no, I'm not a student." And so I was just like, and then like we didn't meet up for like another month, I think, and she shared the bridge diagram with me, and so then we did a Bible study.
All right. Now, I'm going to go in reverse for just a second, y'all. I want y'all to see this, okay? I'm going to go in reverse for just a second. Now, what God was doing so that the first day of school,
Well, it was like the first day of freshman week.
and your name is Chloe, so that Chloe could meet Chelsea. What God was doing was leading somebody to Christ in Carrollton, Georgia, so that 30 years later, you could have a one-on-one with Chelsea. Do you not see the power of God's love to come and find you? Now listen, let's back it up a little further, okay? Because this group doesn't get there without this group. So Chuck Singletary doesn't come to Birmingham, and Frank Barker doesn't ask him, and Chuck is not discipled by Skip Gray, who was led to Christ by Leroy Imes, who was discipled by Lawrence, or he was actually discipled by Jim Downing, who was discipled by Dawson Trotman, which was 90 years ago. You ever saw the movie Back to the Future? And you see the person's disappearing in the picture. You don't have that meaning. So when Dawes was in California discipling Jim Downing, he had you in mind. God had you in mind. Now let's back up even further, y'all. It didn't just start with Dawson Trotman. Jesus called those disciples together the night before he died. And he said, I'm going to a place that I don't want to go. I need you to pray for me. And in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, not my will, but yours be done. And he hung on that cross so that each one of us would have that head-on collision. And you know, it even goes back farther than that. There's a verse in the Bible that says that the Son of Man was slain before the foundations of the world. You know what that means? Before God even created the universe, he had you in mind. And he had your broken nose in mind. And he had Dayton's big elbow in mind. And he had all your basketball. Think about it. If he doesn't play all that basketball growing up, he doesn't play in that pickup basketball game in popular notes. Or maybe you think if he played a little bit more, he wouldn't have been so uncoordinated to hit you in the nose. Y'all see where I'm going with this? Now let's push it forward. Based on what we know from that one campus, over 5,000 students have attended the summer project in the last 20 years from that one campus. Just think about that. It's estimated that nearly 50,000 people have professed their faith in Christ, just from the witness of people who were won to Christ on that campus. Over 700 graduates have gone into full-time Christian work in the U.S. and overseas. 6 stateside campus outreach franchises, 3 international teams have been launched that trace their roots back to West Georgia. 15 stateside franchises trace their roots back to the one ministry. Thousands of graduates are walking with the Lord and seeking to make disciples in their life context. The gospel comes to you. The gospel works in you. The gospel spreads through you. He's doing something at your campus for you. You probably got India tonight. He's doing something on your campus for you. He may have your grandchildren in mind. I want you to feel the power. When we talk about multiplication, we're talking about the power of the love of God that goes before you, comes and finds you, and then will take you all the way to heaven. I told you I wanted you to have the experience tonight, just like I did when I heard Tim Keller preach the gospel. It says, I want to make a commitment to multiplication. Like it was my first time. Or if I've never done that, I want to say, the Great Commission is a satisfactory ambition for my life. It's big enough. I think I could die and say, all right, Lord, that's challenging. That's worthy enough. The Great Commission, it's worth my whole life. Let's close the prayer. 1 John 3, 1 through 3. Behold, or see how great a love the Father has poured out upon us, that we should be called children of God. And this is what we are. For this reason, the world does not understand or know us, for it did not know God. Beloved, we do not know what we shall be, but we do know this. Beloved, we are children of God, and it is not yet clear what we shall be. But we know this. When He appears, we shall be like Him, because we will see Him as He is. And everyone who fixes his hope on this love of God purifies himself just as He is pure. Lord, there's not words to describe the love that our hearts are just overflowing with, because You've poured out Your love to us. And Lord, I want to spend, and I know this group wants to spend the rest of our lives swimming in the ocean of the love of God, never ever being able to exhaust the depth and width and height and personalness and power of the love of God. And we want, Lord, to share this with everyone we know, with our fraternity brother on campus, with that member of our athletic team, with our brother or sister in our family, with our parents, with lost people in India and China. Lord, make us, multiply us, and make us men and women who transform the world as we take the love of God to the ends of the earth. Thank You for Patrick and his family, Tara. Thank You for Brett, his family, Maggie. Thank You for each of these staff. Thank You, Lord, that through them, by dying to themselves, by saying, come and see, follow me, feed my sheep, and go and die, the gospel has come to wash you and Southern, all these other places. I know Linda's would. I saw the revenue. So all of these places, then it's going to go farther, all for Your sake. And use this project to continue to teach us how to train our hearts to be lovers, and not those that are afraid, or those that live in fear, but also those that live in anger. Teach us how to love. And Lord, start working in the lives of our family and friends back on the campus. Multiply our lives for Jesus' sake. In Jesus' name. Amen.